Hello and welcome to this episode of Timeless Topics, where we're going to discuss microdosing self-care. This is part one in a two-part series where we talk about everything from shift length and fatigue to how we practice self-care during long shifts, to burnout, self-advocacy, and critical thinking. We did want to call out that while we were recording this episode, Tracey lost her internet connection for just a hot second, but don't fret, she will be right back. We're excited that you're here. Let's go ahead and jump right into the discussion.
Yeah, I was at a workforce, kind of a nursing workforce conference yesterday, and we were talking about shift length and fatigue. And it kind of made me really start to think about how we teach our students, our new nurses, our new APRNs how to protect themselves, right? And I think that that has to play into all of the discussion of trauma-informed care. Because as we always talk about, if you're running on E, how can I give to anyone else, right? And it made me wish that someone had shared some of that with me when I was younger, because I came out of the gate mid-20s, I can do this, right? Making good money. And so it's like the more shifts I work, the more money I have. I'm living large.
Yeah.
Until mid 30s, maybe late 30s, my body said, no, ma'am, you cannot. And I woke up one morning at work after doing a call shift and couldn't walk because I had thrown my back out and I could not get out of the call room bed. I am on the floor calling the unit saying, I need help, right? I'm in the call room and I can't walk. And they had to take me out of the call room in a wheelchair to the emergency department because my back had completely locked up and I could not put any pressure on my right leg. I didn't walk for a week, right? And even now, 10 years later, when it initially happened, I still have difficulty with my back. If I am stressed, if I am standing too long, my back is like, you need to sit down. We're not okay. And I just wish that someone had shared with me the dynamic of protecting yourself as a means of mental well-being, but also I had nothing to give back to anyone else, right? Because I am now laid up. And that's a minor example compared to what other people go through when they really do kind of hit a wall. But I think that's important for us to think about because how can you teach that, right?
Yeah. I think it starts with mentoring and also with showing it, modeling it, like role modeling behavior. Because you're absolutely right. Like self-care is a means to sustainability in a way. And you can get far by just going hard, right? You'll get far. But then once you hit that wall, just like the preemies in the NICU and the babies in the NICU, they will compensate until they absolutely can't anymore. And then they just hit that cliff, right? And they fall off. And then now we're trying to like come back and like, why, how did we get here? And then we're racking our brain to think of what did we miss? What did we miss? But we forget to reflect on our own experiences in that way. And where were my opportunities to have built in some speed bumps along the way for myself to allow for some self-care? Because I think for the longest time in nursing in general, whether we're APP or at the bedside, the person who works the hard and sacrifices the most is the one who gets the medal, right? We all can probably think of somebody we've worked with who like, oh, she's been here for a million years. She's going to be here for a million years. She works 6 days a week and she's the backbone of the unit, you know, and how much it's like that perfect attendance kind of credit when really, no, sometimes you do need to take a seat and reflect on your own experience and take care of your own body. Because eventually our bodies are going to be like, no, you're not getting out of this call bed. You're stuck. You wanted to be here so bad, I'm going to keep you here. You know?
I like how you use that word sacrifice, Jessi, because I think that's exactly kind of how we get accultured into this work and into our discipline, that it is a sacrificial thing. And when you touched upon trauma-informed care, Tracey, it made me think like when I first was exposed to that concept, I was looking at it through an other lens. That's somebody else. Somebody else has trauma, not me. That's somebody else's thing. And really coming back to some way of understanding that we're all in this together from a human perspective, from a you know, limitations that we have, and limitations is not a bad thing. It's how we keep ourselves safe. But the other piece that you made me think of when you guys were talking, and particularly around shifts, is we know, right? We've got literature that demonstrates that working 12-hour shifts jeopardizes our capacity to perform optimally, right? To perform top of license. And yet, when we're positioned with like, well, okay, then we'll work 8-hour shifts, folks are like, oh no, I don't want to do 8-hour shifts because that'll just ruin my life. Let me just flog myself until, whatever, until my back is out or until I'm completely burnt out so that I only have to work 3 days a week. I'll pay that price for some intangible and probably invisible benefit that I won't have to pay on until later, until I do break down, whether it's emotionally, psychologically, or physically. Yeah, it's just endemic, I think, in our profession. And maybe not just nurses, but nurses certainly, we're definitely at least, silver medal, if not gold medal in this, category. Yeah.
So how do we fix that? Right? Because you mentioned 12-hour shifts, but from the NP standpoint, we're doing 24 plus, right? I've been talking to people that are doing 48, 72, and as we commented, it's like if we raise too much discussion about it, then I told someone, I was like, I think we're going to have to go into the witness protection program because people are going to hunt us down for trying to change this perceived um, work-life balance. Because one of my friends said that to me. She was like, well, it's work-life balance. I was like, but is it really? I think on paper, it looks great to work 7 shifts a month. But I think it also goes back to self-protection, right? Because I do think in some settings, those 12s are fine, those 16s are fine, those 24s can be, as long as people are insightful enough to recognize that there has to be a moment, right? I know that when I am in the middle of like two 24s back to back, on that second 24, I find myself saying, I just need to walk outside, right? Like I just need to take a second. I'm going to walk outside. I'm going to see the sun. I'm going to smell the flowers. And I tell the nurses, I'm here. Here's my work number, but here's also my personal cell phone number in case my work number doesn't work. I am not going any further than I would go if I was going to the cafeteria. So I'm still well within distance to get to you in an emergency, but I need to breathe something besides hospital air because, and that for me is how I kind of refill myself, right? And I think if people can at least acknowledge that they need to do that, I don't know though.
Yeah. Well, there was also some really interesting research that looked at the night shift situation, right? And how damaging that is to your just natural biology, your rhythms, and all the kind of stuff. And so I think it was the Joint Commission and even ANA had issued statements around napping. How do we help people maintain their wellness? And not really corrupting their biology. But obviously people have to be there for the night shift. How can we find those balances? But there's lots of taboos and weird stuff about how folks respond to that and acknowledge that. And I think it kind of comes back to what you guys are talking about is this kind of um, core requirement or core understanding of the idea of self-care. How do I keep myself whole and balanced so that I can perform top of license at the best I can in any given situation because of the critical nature of the work that I do, but also just the natural vulnerabilities that I have as a breathing human being. So there's lots of things that we navigate and we dismiss or marginalize within our professional sphere, because I think it is, as you said earlier, Jessi, it's a badge of honor, and how can we get past that? And realize that, what, actually flogging yourself and beating yourself until you can't get out of bed or until you're burnt out and you leave the profession might not be the best way to navigate the professional careers of nurses.
Yeah, I think I'm just going to go for it here. Like some of this is the internalized capitalism of it all, right? This hustle culture, this need to keep burning ourselves out because if I work hard enough, then I am going to be able to win the system. When the system is rigged, we're not going to win anything. Like there's nothing on the other side. The reality is most of us are much closer to devastation than we are to waking up a billionaire, right? And so, how do we create these systems and dismantle these systems so that we can provide a safe, equitable way to things like being able to go outside and smell some flowers or see some sunshine, right? Because taking care of your needs as a human, right, should be the bare minimum. But sometimes it really does feel like I've got to like put an ad in the newspaper and tell the VP and do all these things just so I can go take a walk. I mean, I just as an educator, I felt that a lot. It was, and I still do, right? Like this need to be constantly available, constantly on. So it's 2 a.m. Somebody's got a question, got to wake up, answer the question. And in some sense, I want the patient and the staff to feel safe, right? I want safe care to happen. I want everybody to feel safe. But am I the only conduit to safety? Like, what else could facilitate safety for this? What system could we build that would allow safety to still be accessible, that doesn't require depleting my personal reserves, right? And I think that's something that we really struggle with, especially in American culture, is just this idea that you are the key to your own success. And like in some sense, sure, right? Like we have to have self-motivation, we have to have a desire and preservation to keep going. But sometimes community is the answer. And shifting cultures around so the community can be built in a way that is supportive, so they understand why we need to go take a walk, why we need to go do this, and how can we actually build actual real life work balance, that isn't just on paper, it looks nice because you're only here 7 days. But if those 7 days are depleting and demoralizing and burning you out, because that's all I could think about was I was like, this is capitalism. Like this is us creating this problem. Like we have decided that we need to compete for everything.
Yeah.
That makes no sense.
And you made me think of this commodification, right? Or is that the right word? Commodifying our humanity. And when we do that to ourselves, it becomes just this default pattern, and that's how we show up and view others. Like my patient and that patient's family, they're also now commodified because they are the reason why I'm here. I have a job because of them. So it's this real super insidious backdrop, I think, to the work that we do. And I think that's why nursing and healthcare professionals at large have so much distress, moral distress. Certainly there are big ethical things that we have to deal with in our day-to-day work, but there's also that kind of silent, slow boil, I think, of moral distress that we experience just because of what you just described, Jessi.
I feel like nursing is at this crisis point.
Yes.
Where you have voices who say, we just need more money. And then you have voices who say, no, we need more support. But everybody is at odds with each other without realizing that, is there an opportunity for more money or better financial compensation? Sure, probably. Especially, I mean, I'm sure there are areas that pay their nurses nothing, right? But that money isn't the only answer to this. But I also don't think wellness initiatives that are just like, here's some lavender, go about your life, like that's not it either. What we really need is structural change.
Right.
That is overwhelming to think about.
Yeah.
But you got to get at it somehow,
And I think the onus comes upon us to really be the ones to create those new systems, design those new systems, because currently the system is totally, what do they call it? Stick and carrot, and that only gets you so far. And then and then when you don't feel valued, or you don't feel seen, you don't feel respected, that's when, you really just start kind of turning into one of those crispy critters, and you're burnt out.
Yeah.
But you're still plugging along because of the golden handcuffs, and you need to survive or whatever. You're the breadwinner of the, all of those things that then cast a pall over how you show up to the suffering and trauma of those that you're, called to care for.
Yeah.
Again, because of this larger systemic trauma. You started that ball, and I love it. Um, so yeah, I mean, there's lots of layers to this. This is not just a one fix, go um, give us more vacation time and we'll be fine kind of a thing. There's a
Right.
much deeper roots to this.
Yeah, I think burnout is really where nursing is heading, like on a global scale. And if we can't, my whole time growing up as a nurse, it was always about, nursing shortage, nursing shortage. The boomers are about to retire and we're going to have this giant gap. But we're turning people out well ahead of retirement. Like we're sending people out of this,
Yes, yes,
And burnout is going to become this almost pandemic
yeah,
within this subset if we can't figure out how to combat this.
right.
And and then you're going to need healthcare and there is going to be no one.
Zero, right? And just recently, I think it was in an ANA newsletter or something like that. I think globally there's like 6 million, it might be more, a nursing shortage, right? I mean, we're facing a global shortage, and that's not going to get better anytime soon. Particularly, with our older nurses, retiring, and that whole shift, and we're struggling to get newer nurses to come into the profession, because of what they're seeing about the life, the lack of work-life balance, the sacrificial kind of expectation of nurses in the field. I mean, just lots of challenges. Never mind just looking at our niche of neonatal nursing and how we're struggling.
Yeah. Um, we got to get a handle on it, or it makes me like feel like we're gonna lose our footing.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? We're gonna lose our foundation. And I hate always taking it back to Florence. I know you like Florence, but I have like a thing about how she was pretty racist, and sometimes it bothers me. But
It's
like,
okay. Yes, I appreciate.
like you kind of have to speak with historical accuracy. So like, but I do think that there is this tradition, right? This I don't know, guiding path in nursing about being the caretaker. And generally, caretakers aren't valued in the same way as decision makers. But we absolutely should be, right? Because the care cannot get done if the decisions can get made, but if there's no one to do that work, then it doesn't matter,
Right,
right?
right,
But finding value and agency in that is how I was brought up to be a nurse. Was like, yes, sure, I have to follow an order, quote unquote, but also it's my job to make sure those orders are safe. My job to use my critical thinking skills to protect everyone, including myself and the patient and even the provider.
right,
Sir, you don't want to write that. That's not what we want to do here,
right, right.
But we've kind of shifted a little bit away from that ownership, maybe,
Yeah.
of it. And getting back to that, I think, is part of the answer, along with holding systems accountable to be better.
Yeah.
Um,
And kind of coming back to your comment about kind of the larger challenges in healthcare, particularly with the current state in the United States, um, where we're not investing in education, we're not investing in scholarship, that we're going to see more and more folks entering the profession that may be more, and no disrespect, but if we continue to funnel folks that have a backstory of privilege, then the people that we're serving are going to feel more and more disconnected
mhm.
from the healthcare industry at large. Because again, and we listen to so many brilliant people talk about their experiences. Like, it would really mean something to me to see somebody who looks like me caring for me, and how soothing that can be, how calming and reassuring that can be. instead of just seeing this cadre of, privileged individuals that continue to care for me, that there's like just an undercurrent. Again, I'm not throwing the baby out with the bathwater, but I think some of those inequities are also going to be have a negative impact on the caliber, the quality of healthcare, and again, kind of perpetuating this burnout. So we took it all around the world, Trace.
Okay, cool.
we
Excellent.
we talked about, burnout and nursing shortage, and like we're actively pushing people out, by not fixing it, right? Like to your point earlier, like how do we push this change? How do we help teach these things? Because like you had mentioned about, you just wish somebody would have sat you down earlier and said, that you don't have to be this superhero. Like you need to care for yourself. And I think that is something that goes both ways in a sense, because the message sometimes is sent, but it's not received. But I also think that we don't do the best job in sending it in a way that makes it accessible, right? Because sometimes it feels like, oh yeah, you can take a vacation because you've been here for 20 years. So of course you get your time off, without realizing that, well, no, there's an equitable path forward for everybody to have access to self-care. But I do need you to speak to your needs. I don't know them automatically, right? So it's this balancing act of recognizing that everyone has access to this, but we all need to learn how to advocate for ourselves too. And if you don't say, hey, I really need this time off to do XYZ, or when can we make a plan for this, then I don't know that a problem exists, right? Which is the almost the people pleasing of it all that we tend to fall into, especially as people socialized as females. We tend to stick with that, right? Of like, if I just keep the peace, then everything will be fine. When sometimes you got to be a little gruff, you got to be a little bit of an advocate, right? Which is one of my core tenets of belief. When I think of my version of trauma-informed care, it is rooted in advocacy and being that sandpaper when it's needed to be. Because I know that if I'm a sandpaper for someone, then I'm going to go ahead and prep that surface so that someone else won't have to do it too. And role modeling that is one way to show that, like, look, I did it and I survived. I still have a job, right? They didn't fire me yet, kind of mentality. But getting to like a broader view of that to make people feel like, even though maybe I am a new grad, maybe I only have been here a year or 6 months, that doesn't make you any less of a human being and any less of someone who needs to be supported in more ways than just your professional development.
Yeah.
I mean, I love me some professional development, but you also need to have personal wholeness to be able to achieve your highest ability to, have and practice, like Mary keeps saying, at the height of your licensure, or in a way, even to make it even more personal for that person in a way that feels validating to you and like is fulfilling for you.
Yeah.
I mean, sure, we all have bills to pay. We come to get a paycheck, right? But we come for more than just that.
Yeah. I love how you just mentioned about, being that sandpaper. That takes courage, right? And I think a lot of folks that come into nursing, I mean, just like any profession, right? You come with a backstory of different life experiences that color how you stand in your professional identity, right? I hear in different locations in the US and maybe abroad, but that some places, and I know it's both sides of the coin, but where the nurses may just, you had talked earlier about following orders. They don't challenge the orders. They just do the order. They just operationalize that handmaiden vision of what a nurse is versus the critical thinker. And so, those also feel like opportunities for us to address the education and professional development of young nurses as well. Because if I've, been raised in a historically hierarchical, paternalistic, somewhat maybe misogynistic environment, I may just, be that person that kowtows to authority and not really stand into what are the real expectations of my licensure, as an advocate for the patient, when I'm faced with different hierarchical challenges. So that also is going to impede my ability not only to stand up for you, but to definitely stand up for myself, and actually practice self-care. Did I explain that clear?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, they have to
Complex, isn't it?
feel like they can do it, right? And if the culture wherever it is or however they were raised, for the lack of a better word, is to just accept, like, well, the doctor said it, so I guess that's just what we got to do. But if you have that inkling, right, that like, I don't know if this is the most correct way to go about this or the safest way or whatever. That advocacy and asking that question and escalation is actually your duty, right?
Right.
But we can only access those levels if you have the critical thinking skills to be able to do that, right? And that is something that has to be fostered. Some of it is innate, like that natural just curiosity of like that toddler, like I just go, why? Why? Well, why do you do that? As annoying as it is, you want to answer those whys because then it teaches them that when I have questions, like I can learn the answer. I don't have to just accept that the sky is blue because the sky is blue. Like we can get into the weeds of why. And sometimes that is not valued as much, I feel like. And or you think, oh, it's too critical, I don't have time to explain why. Well,
Yeah.
then the debrief comes in, right? Of, well, yes, maybe in this exact second I can't sit down and go through the whole patho of why I can't, answer this, but let's debrief and let's still learn something, because that's how we improve. And then we take what we learn to the next, similar patient scenario, and then our outcomes are inherently better, right? It's the whole QI of it all. And I think that applies to the topic of burnout and giving them the tools they need to be able to stand up for themselves too, is recognizing that, and maybe it's being loud and being vocal about it. I am so glad I took that time off because, I was able to get some stuff done around the house. I was able to spend time with my family or my dog or my pet, or I was able to watch paint dry. And now I'm coming back into this role like reinvigorated. I'm actually looking forward to coming back, and I'm glad I was able to take that step away.
Yeah.
And showing them that the world didn't end. Nobody ceased to receive care. Babies were still cared for. Everybody still got their paychecks. Like everything still happened, even though you took a moment of respite for yourself to kind of work against that superhero concept.
So here's a question that I have for you too. What do we know about impact on fatigue, mental well-being, and any correlation or association with our implicit bias
Mm.
aspects, right? Because it makes me stop and think that when, as we said earlier, if you don't have it in you, how can you give to someone else? I would also argue the same thought that if you are completely depleted, that things that you may be able to stop, think about, be insightful about, would be kind of at the lower end of priority. But I don't know that there's any evidence to support that.
Yeah, there actually is, and that is such a wicked cool topic to bring up, Tracy. Um, and again, if you just think about it from an energy perspective, that when you are energy depleted, your body recognizes where the energy, what the energy state is, and so just starts shutting down different functions, right? Think about the fight or flight response, right? That it's a similar phenomenon that particularly when you're fatigued, or if you're hypoglycemic, you haven't been responsive to that, or even if you're hypernatremic, you haven't really been staying hydrated, your body is going to redirect energy available to just the more vital functions. And so one of the things that gets kind of tipped off is, that critical thinking capacity, right? Because we're just trying to stay alive right now. We're just trying to maintain this low level. I'll try and find some articles, that we could maybe even include or reference if this episode goes live. But that's such a really good question, because I think we don't really appreciate that the the global implications when we are not at our best, when we're not operating on all four cylinders, then we are more vulnerable to not just physical fatigue and emotional fatigue, but moral fatigue, right? And we can fall prey to just some of those implicit biases that are kind of embedded in our default network, right? When you think about how, the connectome of your brain, that when I'm overwhelmed and I'm not, or I'm feeling depleted, then I'm just operating at a low level, and that's my default mode network. And that can be wrought with lots of different preconceived patterns of belief and perspective that I can overcome when I'm fully vibrant and I'm alert, I'm not tired, I'm energized, versus when I'm not feeling that way. So super awesome question. But again, who thinks about that stuff? Right? I mean, but that was such a really cool, critical question to ask. And I think it becomes incumbent on us as professional healers, as nurses, to really understand, just normal physiology, and then take that wisdom and then superimpose. Okay, so what does this look like in me then? So what is my A game? What is my B game? And what is my D game? And being able to recognize, I feel like I'm shifting to B or D or C, right? But I never was taught. I mean, not that I'm putting this on somebody else, but it never became part of my awareness that that was even important, because I had a pulse and I had a license. And that felt like all that was required of me, was to just show up with a pulse and a license. And it wasn't until over time when I started really looking at some of my colleagues who maybe were called in for an extra shift because they had a pulse and a license, and going, I don't think we want Bonnie with just a pulse and a license, because you know what you get. But again, I never had the awareness or the aha, or maybe even curiosity to go, is that what I look like? After working 4 12s in a row, and they call me up and say, hey, can you do another overtime shift? And I'm thinking money, and I'm thinking, I got a pulse, I got a license, I'm there. But maybe nobody wants me there. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I think the skills and competence is only a portion of it, right? And we tend to disproportionately value those things, the technical skills, the competence, the ability to do the care really isn't what's in question as far as like the knowledge base of it, but can you navigate the circumstances, right? If you let the amygdala make all the decisions, you don't have access to cognition. So you want to be able to partner with your past experience, which is what our amygdala holds, right? Our past experience that then tells us how did we emotionally experience it, because I need to survive. I don't want to have a threat to my safety, but I don't actually just want to survive at the bedside. I want to thrive, right? Because then I can facilitate thriving for the rest of the people on my team, for my patients, for their family, for everybody. But if I'm just surviving, you can tell almost immediately, oh, Jessi's in a mood. I ain't gonna ask her that, And it becomes this like distress signal that is subconsciously sent out that says, not today. Okay. And what if it needed to be today for somebody? And now I'm talking with a family, or I'm talking with a baby, or I'm training somebody, I'm precepting somebody, and I don't have it in me to be the best version because I'm surviving. I'm also subliminally telling them, you don't have to be your best version either. The expectation here is for you to show up with a license and a pulse and to kind of sort of know what you're doing. But really, we really want people to thrive in this aspect and get something out of it more than just the paycheck, right? But we've got to change the systems that cause us to motivate to need the extra shifts and all of that. Like, I'm no stranger to overtime. I joke all the time. We bought our first house when I worked all my overtime shifts. Like I get it. And sometimes with the short-term goal in mind, we can put ourselves through the ringer a little bit, right? But it's being able to understand, when is short-term, like what is the definition of short-term? Because are we talking like now it's a lifestyle and now I'm stuck in this survival state and I no longer have access to thriving because of a system that I built for myself? Or do I just need to get past this marathon? Am I going through some essentially physiological stress to get through this next phase in life, right? And that takes a lot of self-awareness to know where you're at. And that's not encouraged a lot in healthcare or really in the greater culture, right? It's easier to just say, oh, it's somebody else's fault, rather than setting back and reflect and say, well, maybe I have some accountability for this too. And what is my lesson here that I can take away to then bring to a similar situation in the future?
So I think those are all very interesting points, right? Because I think at least I know I do, joke about, oh, I'm so tired, I have no filter, right? Without realizing what that really
Yeah.
means. But now hearing it and really kind of processing it, it's like, oh, that's what it means. I'm not at my best, but we kind of put it out there as a joke without thinking about the implications of that.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of Timeless Topics. We welcome your feedback and suggestions, so please reach out. Our handle on all social media platforms is @TimelessTopicsNICU, and our email address is timelesstopicsnicu@gmail.com. See you next time.